See, I'm now going to pass on someone put a Facebook post up about it. And then the night
Order. I call this meeting to order. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts will come to order. My name is Nolan Young. I'll be chairing this committee. I'd ask anybody with their phones put it on silent, and I'll ask committee members to introduce themselves, beginning to my left.
Danielle.
Oh, sorry. Danielle Barkos, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's.
Good morning and welcome. Tom Taggart, MLA for Colchester North.
Good morning. John A. McDonald, MLA for Hants East.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Melissa Sheehy-Richard. I'm the MLA for Hants West.
Claudia Chender, MLA for Dartmouth South.
Good morning. Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Good to see you all again. Brendan McGuire, Halifax Atlantic.
Zach Churchill, Leader of the Opposition, MLA for Yarmouth.
And just a note for everyone, we have officials with us from the Auditor General's Office, Legislative Council Office, Legislative Committee's Office are in attendance as well. And on today's agenda, we have with us officials from the Departments of Community Services, Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the Executive Panel of Housing and HRM in respect to investments in affordable housing programming. And I would ask the witnesses to introduce themselves, beginning with Ms. Knight on my far right.
Good morning. Joy Knight, Executive Director, Employment Support and Income Assistance.
Good morning. Melissa McKinnon, Deputy Minister of Community Services.
Good morning. Adrian Mason, Director of Housing Development and Partnerships with Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Good morning. Pam Menchington, Executive Director of Client Services for the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency.
Good morning. Byron Rafuse, Deputy Minister, Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Brian Ward, Executive Director of Operations, Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency.
Good morning. Vicki Elliott Lopez. I'm the Senior Executive Director with Housing with the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Good morning. My name is Jared Babushkin. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Acceleration and Performance with the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Welcome. I would ask Deputy Rafuse to begin opening remarks, followed by Deputy McKinnon. Deputy Rafuse.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting us here to speak to you about investments in affordable housing programming. You're likely getting tired of seeing me, as this is my third time in 3 weeks. But for those who don't know me, I am Byron Rafuse, and I'm the Deputy Minister of the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And at this time, I'm also serving in capacity as Interim Director or Interim CEO of the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency. Chair, I think we can all agree that everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to live. Right now, we need more supply, more people to build, and more collaboration. Increasing stock takes time, hard work, and a willingness to do things differently. And it takes us all working together. My staff on the department have been working collaboratively to do just that over the last couple of years, and we're beginning to slowly see the needle move. We are nowhere near done, but together we're making progress. One major milestone of note is the recently released housing plan, which represents a $1.7 billion investment over 5 years in housing for solutions for all Nova Scotians. I will echo what the Minister said last month at the day of the announcement. This plan was not built in a boardroom. It was crafted using comprehensive data collected from the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Needs Assessment Report. This is the first time ever that in Nova Scotia that we've had this level of data to help inform our way forward. Over 20,000 people from one end of the province to the other provided input into that process. This plan reflects voices and ideas from all communities. The plan is called Our Homes, Action for Housing, and is a multi-year strategy to drive work with our partners to 1, increase housing supply, 2, grow and sustain affordable housing, and 3, deliver programs people need. The need assessments told us we have a gap of about 41,200 units by the year 27-28. That explains, this plan explains how we're going to fill this gap. And when we do, we should see housing vacancies return to those of the 2016 level, which will enhance affordability significantly. The housing plan is our roadmap for the way forward, but I'd like to take a few moments to focus on where we've been in the last couple of years. While the plan was in development, we did not sit idle, but not by any stretch. In fact, in your packages, you'll see a document that reflects the housing announcements we made in our department over the last two years alone. When printed, this document is over 185 pages long. That document showcases things like legislation to improve tenants from unacceptable rent increases, ways to cut red tape, and ensure development can proceed as quickly as possible. It shows that we almost tripled the investment in rent supplements and doubled the amount of people that we helped in the last 2 years. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we announced program changes that will enhance more seniors with eligibility for a rent supplement, and those who are receiving one will have more money in their pockets. It shows millions of dollars invested in community housing sector to build their capacity to offer affordable housing options in their communities. Through programs like the Community Housing Acquisition Program and the Community Housing Infrastructure and Repair Program, we're giving nonprofits and community organizations the support they need, financially and otherwise, to preserve existing homes and strengthen organizations for future development and growth. And just recently, we announced the Secondary and Backyard Suite Program, which incents people with up to $25,000 to share the cost of building an affordable suite in their home or on their property to enhance the stock. We are investing in modular housing options for healthcare workers, additional housing for students, and temporary housing for people experiencing homelessness. And the Housing Task Force has been hard at work to create the conditions to unlock 20,000 units to be built in HRM. Chair, while we have taken significant steps to improve and enhance public housing in Nova Scotia, we have also taken significant steps to improve and enhance public housing in Nova Scotia with the creation of the Nova Scotia Provincial Housing Agency last December. The agency is focused on creating new client service model, improving the improvements to existing stock, and investing in accessibility enhancements while we serve our most vulnerable residents. The agency also manages over 11,000 units, and you're likely aware of our most recent announcement to add 222 new public housing units that will house 522 Nova Scotians. This alone is an $83 million investment. It's one of the largest investment in new public housing builds since the 90s. Chair, I could go on for hours, but I respect my time limit and look forward to sharing more details with you the next couple hours. I will conclude by saying I know everyone in this room shares our vision for a strong future where all Nova Scotians have access to safe, affordable housing that meets their diverse needs. I look forward to our work together to support Nova Scotians. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Rayfuse. Deputy McKinnon, did you have some opening remarks too? Deputy McKinnon.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. Joining me this morning is Joy Knight, Executive Director of Employment Support and Income Assistance. Her team includes a very dedicated group of staff working to address homelessness and supportive housing, who work very closely with the group gathered here today. Community services is an important part of the housing continuum, working to ensure people experiencing homelessness have the necessary shelter and supports to help them advance to more permanent housing. In the last 2 years, 449 new supportive housing units have been created. We've opened and stabilized 10 shelters, created an emergency weather response for people experiencing homelessness, and implemented diversion support funding to prevent homelessness. Most recently, we announced the public-private partnership to create a tiny home village in Sackville and a partnership with Pallet to create temporary shelter villages across Nova Scotia. 15 supportive housing buildings have been created with 147 units through the Community Housing Acquisition Program that Deputy Rayfuse mentioned. At DCS, our budget to provide supports for those experiencing homelessness has increased by about $25 million over 2 years. None of this work would move without our service provider partners who work tirelessly within the very difficult context of our current housing crisis to help people find and keep a home of their own. In my very short time here, it has become very clear that we are incredibly fortunate in Nova Scotia to be working alongside dedicated partners who have been engaged in this work as staff and many as volunteers for decades. It goes without saying that it will take a focused and sustained commitment to address the root causes of the housing crisis, homelessness and poverty, that calls upon all of us to take up this challenge. There is much more to be done, and we'll continue to move as quickly as possible with our partners to help connect Nova Scotians to the supports and services they need. Thank you very much.
Is there any other opening remarks? Seeing none. Just for some of the new members here, just so we all know, the typical way of this committee is 20 minutes for each party. If you're in the middle of an answer, unfortunately, at that 20-minute mark, I'll cut you off. So we'll start with the Liberal Caucus. The time right now is 9:10. I recognize the honourable member from Yarmouth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for being here today. So lovely to see such dedicated public servants, and very happy that everybody's working on this issue, which is affecting thousands of Nova Scotians from one end of the province to the other, whether they're dealing with homelessness or lack of affordable housing. The situation is certainly increasing stress on our population and creating issues in our hospital as well. In my first question to Ms. Vicky Elliott Lopez, lovely to see you. In terms of the special planning areas, these were announced in March 2022. There have not been many announcements for developments. Have we done an analysis on the special planning area process compared to HRM's typical process? And have we done an analysis to see if this is actually making development approvals faster or getting shovels in the ground more quickly?
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
Thank you for the question. So when a special planning area is named, the HRM planning body is still the primary planning body. So developers still work very closely with HRM. They go through all of the studies, the required studies, the development agreements, and so on. There are two key things that change in the process. Within a special planning area, there's flexibility with regard to how public consultation's done. Public consultation is always still done, but it may be online if it's a minor amendment to the municipal planning strategy. It may be through meetings. The other key piece is that the minister takes the place of council. So that is the time that's shaved off. Within the special planning areas, HRM staff have made those a priority. So I'd have to go back to the staff and ask them in terms of where the special planning areas would have been placed on their priority list versus where they are now. We would assume that it would have come forward as a priority.
Mr. Churchill.
We'd love to see, I think, at the committee, any analysis that's done to point to whether this process has quickened up getting shovels in the ground and getting developments done more quickly. I think that's very important for the conversation. When it comes to affordability, we heard Deputy Rayfuse mention this again today, but the housing plan seems to be primarily focused on market-based housing. We know that with interest rates being high, with labor being short, cost of labor going up, costs of supplies going up. We're wondering if the market is actually going to be producing more affordable housing. And I think important to understand whether it is or not is the definition of affordable housing. CMHC considers affordable housing lodging that costs less than 30% of a household's before tax income. Does the province hold that same definition for affordable housing? My question is to the chair of the executive panel.
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
So we align our definitions with CMHC, yes, and what I will say, though, is that affordability means different things to different people. So what I find affordable will be very different from what somebody making minimum wage finds affordable. And so that's why our programs offer varying levels of affordability. So, for example, when we enter into an agreement with developers or community housing agencies under our affordable housing development program, we look for a minimum of 80% of average market rent. That will be affordable for a number of people. That will bring them in line with that. But in addition to that, we have community housing providers. And I want to just correct a bit of I'm going to say it's a bit of a myth out there. Oftentimes people equate public housing with rent geared to income and make an assumption that they're the best non-market provider out there. We have a lot of community organizations that also offer rent geared to income. We want to support the community housing sector. We want to grow them as a really critical part of our non-market housing provision in Nova Scotia. And so again, everything from rent geared to income to 60% deeply affordable, up to 80% of average market rent. We offer programs at all levels.
Mr. Churchill.
So when the government says that they're creating affordable housing, does it meet the definition of CMHC of housing that would be that would cost less than 30% of a household's before tax income. And when it comes to the special planning areas, is the expectation that the special planning areas are going to result in affordable housing that meets the provincial definition of affordable housing?
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
With respect to special planning areas, the goal of special planning areas is to increase supply, because we know that the best way to achieve affordability is through increased supply. The Turner-Drake study showed that in spades, that we just need to get more housing faster, and that's the intent of the special planning areas, is to bring more housing to market faster, to bring them back to, I think, the minister talks about the 2016 levels. Once we get a healthy vacancy rate, those market rates will come down and we'll achieve more affordability in the province.
Mr. Churchill?
So the definition, like when the province uses affordable housing, when representatives of the government, the minister uses affordable housing, does that mean housing that would meet the CMHC threshold for affordable housing, which is 30% of a household's before tax income? That's a question I would like answered, because affordable housing is a term that's thrown around there a lot, and I don't know if we've actually defined it in the province.
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
So when we enter into an agreement with a provider and they offer us 80% of average market rents, that will achieve that level of affordability for some. And again, because there are varying salary levels in Nova Scotia and varying wages, 80% will meet that threshold that CMHC has defined for some people. 60% will meet it for other people. And then through public housing, rent geared to income. Public housing also offers flat rate rents. So again, across all of our programs, affordability means different things to different people, and our intent is to reach those varying levels of affordability across the spectrum.
Mr. Churchill.
So I do think it's concerning that we don't have a definition that's being applied for affordable housing. I also think it's concerning that we haven't seen, despite the rhetoric around more housing faster, we haven't seen any analysis that suggests that any of the interventions that the province has taken is resulting in more housing being built faster. Furthermore, when you take into consideration the market factors, vacancy rate being key among them, which I think is close to zero right now, interest rates, building costs, labor shortages, the market doesn't seem to be producing affordable housing right now. In fact, if you look at any real estate market in the province, rural, and particularly in urban, Halifax and urban areas, the market has gone up pretty substantially. And with the Premier pushing to double the population, and with housing starts actually slowing down significantly in the province, how are we going to achieve affordable housing and a healthy vacancy rate, which would be at 3% with all these factors? And how long does the province think, according to its analysis, that it will take to get to a healthy vacancy rate, which I think is assumed to be around 3%. So my question to the chair is, a healthy vacancy rate around 3%, what's the timeline to get there? And if there's any more clarity that the chair can provide on how the market is going to produce affordable housing, I think the committee would certainly be happy to hear that, because right now it doesn't seem like the market conditions are such that affordable housing is going to be created through market forces alone.
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
So I can start, and then I may punt to the deputy. The statistics that we've looked at shows that Nova Scotia housing starts did increase by 1.7% between 2022 and 2023. And completions, which is the critical statistic that we want to look at, increased by 12.9% from 2022 to 2023. We do hear from developers that things have slowed with rising interest rates, but with the tax measures that government has taken, we've also heard from the developers that they're ready to pick up and start going again. Deputy, do you have anything to add to that?
Deputy Rayfuse.
Certainly, and as Vicki indicated, I mean, the definition of affordable is dependent on the individual. So there's not going to be one definition. So I just want to say we're not going to say this is what affordable means. The housing plan is meant to address the spectrum of housing, and so we'll intervene as we can across that spectrum. In some places, it's rent guarantee income. Sometimes it is not, what your question's begging is, what the problem being is that there's an issue with supply right now, and we need to be able to increase supply. And once we have an opportunity or the ability to increase supply, affordability will be impacted. The housing plan speaks of targets and the intervention the provinces will be making to help achieve those targets. If we do so, affordability will be achieved across the spectrum. It will mean that there'll be more housing supplies. We do know that we need to do more in that area. Things like the HST relief does move the needle. There's other things that we can do. Developers are not required to have to have affordable units in their units. We try to incent them to do that through various programs. But until we get the supply up to where it should be, the market of supply and demand will dictate that we have some issues to deal with. Increased supply is the answer.
Mr. Churchill?
But we don't have a timeline on when that's going to happen. We haven't seen the interventions to date impact increased supply at the rate that we need. We have the Premier and the government still focused on doubling the population at a time when our housing system is collapsing under its current weight. And we don't have market conditions that are going to lend themselves to more affordable houses being built more quickly. And we'll certainly see this reflected in the rent costs in Nova Scotia. There was a report, or was reported this morning, that Nova Scotia has the fastest rising rent since the 1970s at 14.1%. The province's current rate of rent inflation is also the highest in the country. We've seen the average rent for an apartment in Halifax go up to $1,875, which has been a 20.6% increase year over year. And for a two-bedroom, the average rent is now $2,241, which is a 16.1% increase. These are very, very concerning conditions for people, and we're seeing the most acute symptom of a literal housing crisis. Like, it's not hyperbole to say there's a housing crisis; it actually is one. And the most acute symptom being the rapid rising rate of homelessness that we're seeing. Then there's also everybody else who's not experiencing homelessness that's really feeling the cost pressures of living right now, creating stress. Even talking to ER doctors, we're seeing some of these folks show up in the hospital. And there doesn't seem to be a real plan to kind of deal with the affordability of the rental market as well. We do have a rent cap right now, but doesn't seem to be working in terms of managing rents. So what is the plan to look at the rapid rising increase in rental costs in the province and the impact that that's having on people? And is there a strategy to deal with that situation outside of relying on market forces? Because again, market forces right now are creating an unaffordable situation, and we're seeing that show up in the rental costs. Like, that's what the market's producing right now. We're seeing that in the real estate market, where I think the lowest price on a townhouse you can see right now is probably $500,000. Trailers are going for $350,000 to $400,000 in the city. This is where the market's heading right now. So what is the government's plan from an intervention perspective to look at the rent costs, which are driving some people working people out of apartments and into tents?
Deputy Rayfuse?
I would say that the government's plan is outlined in the 5-year action plan. That is what the government's strategy is to help deal with that. And if you look at that plan and read it, there's a number of initiatives either in place or planned that will help address some of the issues that you put forward. it will intervene and try to encourage more and faster development. There are programs to allow for more affordable housing units to be developed with partners in the not-for-profit area. There are aspects and that addresses both home ownership and rental. In the rental area, the government's been quite clear that we're continuing on with the rent cap. It's been extended for a couple more years. Those aspects, while the market adjusts and supply can come on stream, are the tools that the government will continue to use. And as we said earlier, we're not finished. There will be more things that we'll have to look at, and we'll adjust accordingly. The plan talks about being nimble, and we'll adjust and we'll move forward and find more ways to partner with those who are interested in providing affordable housing and those who are in it for market units.
MLA Churchill.
Clearly, there's insufficiencies in the current plan. Again, the plan is heavily reliant on market forces right now, and we're all experiencing what the market is producing right now. The rent cap obviously isn't working. We have the highest rental increases in the country. We have the highest rental increases since we've seen in the 1970s. And any new entries into the rental market are subsidizing and paying inflated prices to essentially subsidize those that are paying lower prices under the cap. And that cap was supposed to be in place for 2 years, and then it's not working right now, particularly for those new entries into the rental market. And I mean, the prices are reflecting that. I'm concerned that we don't have a timeline on supply. We have no analysis on how the special planning areas are actually going to increase the speed in which we're going to build more homes or apartment units more quickly. We've not provided, there's been no analysis conducted on that that's been presented that I'm aware of. We also, Deputy and Chairperson, we also haven't heard on what the timeline is for vacancy rates to increase. So we don't have real timelines on when the supply issue is going to resolve itself. We don't have analysis on the interventions that have been taken so far on how well they're doing. And we don't have a plan to deal with the egregious increases in rental prices, again, that are driving working people that have jobs into homelessness at a rate that we haven't seen in our province. And so, I mean, it's very clear 2 years in that we've got to rethink the strategy and the interventions that are taking place. And so, again, the special planning areas, how many of the developments or units that are built in these special planning areas are we planning on being affordable? And again, sure, affordability is different. Everybody's income is different, but I mean, when you use the definition of affordability as 30% of a household's before tax income, that's pretty consistently applied to every income bracket. There's a reason why CMHC uses that definition. I'm not sure why we're not adopting that definition here in Nova Scotia, because again, it is applicable to every single income bracket and fairly. But I would like to know how many units in the special planning areas is the province planning or has identified as being affordable or attainable housing, and what the prices that the government thinks those units are going to be.
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
Thank you. We would encourage developers to approach the province to participate in our programs and have that conversation with them to promote affordability within the special planning areas. With regard to the analysis, what I will say is that this is unfortunately, I would like to say, a Canadian problem, housing crisis, but we know it's actually North American housing crisis, and nobody seems to have cracked the nut on how to get housing on site tomorrow. But as government, I think our job is to create the conditions to facilitate those conditions, and then we look to our partners, our developers, to tell us where we need to work to facilitate those conditions, and then we look to them to build. And we know that there are forces working against that right now that are out of many people's controls, but we leverage our policies, we use our legislative levers, and we use our funding levers to do the very best that we can to do more faster.
Emily Churchill with 18 seconds.
I mean, the fact is that we can promote affordable housing, but I mean, developers that are dealing with higher interest rates, labor shortages, higher costs aren't able to produce that. So we've got special planning areas that aren't resulting in faster developments to date.
Order. The time has elapsed. The NDP Caucus, I recognize MLA Chender.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So most Fridays I knock on doors in Dartmouth South because I'm away from the constituency a lot these days, and I try to figure out what's going on with people. And a couple weeks ago, I went and knocked on doors on Gaston Road, which, when I was elected, was sort of one of the last bastions of what we would call affordable housing in Dartmouth South, because we had gotten a note from a legal aid worker who had told us that there were egregious illegal rent increases happening right across that area. And sure enough, we knocked on a door, and in this building, which had 6 units, most residents were paying between $800 and $900 a month. They had all received a letter saying that their rent would go up to $1,350 in the new year. And so at most doors that I knocked on, immediately they produced this letter and said, look at this letter we got. Like, are we going to be homeless? And I said, no, that's illegal. Like, that doesn't, you know, you all have continuous leases. There is a 5% rent cap. That's not going to happen. And I spoke to a mother and her son who lived together, and she started to cry. And she said, well, thank God, because we had already started thinking about what it would be like to live in a tent. And I'm not making this up. This is literally a conversation I had on the doorstep. I will just add that I then unfortunately knocked on the door of the superintendent, who told me exactly where I should go, and that he didn't care if it was illegal, and that he would happily go to court because landlords have to make money too. This is the situation that we're facing on the ground. People who are actively planning to live in tents. And so against that backdrop, I want to say that, you know, for the people in that building, that $800 or $900 a month probably was affordable in that definition of 30%. I guess I would echo some of the comments of my colleague and say that I don't think it, of course, affordable, attainable depends on your income level, but it's always going to be that 30% of your income level. So I don't, I have a hard time understanding why the government won't, in fact, adopt that definition of affordability. Because, yes, if you make $200,000 a year, 30% of that in rent is going to be attainable or affordable. Name that percentage. That's why we do rent geared to income, so that we know that people can be renting things or buying things that they can afford. Ms. Elliott-Lopez spoke about the need to enhance and build the non-market housing sector. I couldn't agree more. But, you know, I would say in the last 25 minutes of listening to presentations, there was that one comment from you, and then what I would say was a huge argument presented for what I would call trickle-down housing, which I don't think works. Yes, we need supply. I don't disagree with the numbers. And we need supply at every level. So we need supply that is attainable to people who make $250,000 a year. And we need supply that is attainable to people who make $50,000 a year or $30,000 a year, or who might be on income assistance. And then the question becomes, well, what do we prioritize? Yes, we can all walk and chew gum at the same time. The number of you here demonstrates that there are lots of people working in different areas of the system. But I think that the challenge that that we face trying to understand this issue and to crack this nut is that we hear a lot about trickle-down housing and how supply will solve our problems and how the answer to the housing crisis is more housing. And we don't hear very much about strengthening the non-market housing sector and making sure that the people in the most need get the housing that they need. And I mean, we could go on and on about trickle-down housing. We could talk about that offline. I am firmly believe that it doesn't work. Yes, we need supply. Absolutely, everybody needs supply. Will that, in any meaningful timeline, drive down the price of housing? Not for the people whose door I knocked on Gaston Road. Not for any of the constituents that I have or any of the people that I talk to around the province who are in core housing need. There are thousands and thousands of them. Those people aren't going to wait 5 years. They're not going to wait 10 years. They're not going to wait maybe 15 years for supply to drive down pricing. And so I guess my question is, and I think this is a question for Deputy Minister Rayfuse, but I'm not sure. What is the investment in strengthening that non-market housing sector? So I know there are programs versus expediting private sector development. So we hear a lot about special planning areas. I'll ask about that next. We hear a lot about that. Can you quantify for me in terms of dollars, programs, staffing? How are we juggling those two things?
TM Rayfuse.
Thank you for the question. And before I turn it over to Adrian to get into our programs where we do support those types of non-market housing, I just want to reiterate is that our analysis does show that increasing supply will have an impact on pricing. And with our intervention across the board, the spectrum of housing, we hope to get at those areas of across the whole spectrum, including affordable housing for the low income. We do use rent geared to income in our public housing rental agreements. We do use a definition of 80% of market for affordability and new development. And we do use the aspect of the hills aspect, all CMHC usages of affordability and eligibility for programs. But I want to hand it over to Adrian.
Quickly, MLA Chender.
I'm aware of the program, so I don't need a list of the programs. I'm asking for a quantification of the amount of money spent expediting private sector development versus the amount of money and energy spent on increasing the supporting the non-market housing sector. Briefly, please, just because I only have 20 minutes. Thanks. Okay.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Member. Good question. I think we would agree that one of the core pillars of the action plan is to build capacity within the community housing sector. When I refer to community housing, obviously I'm referring to all non-profit and or co-op housing. In 2020-21, government spent $6 million on that sector. Last fiscal 22-23, they spent $60 million, so a tenfold increase on that sector. Roughly half of that $60 million was in growing and sustaining the sector, and roughly $30 million was expanding it, growing, creating new units. The Affordable Housing Development Programme, which incents the construction of new affordable housing, generates just over 300 new units a year. Roughly half of those will be in the community housing sector. It was just under 50% last year. It's expected to be just over 50% this year. We've had a suite of new programs that we've introduced in the last year, some of the first in Canada, the Community Housing Growth Fund. I know you don't want to roll down on all the programs, but it was the first in Canada. It's proving to be fruitful. We've invested more money in that since it started. They spent about $2.25 million in the first year, so October to October. The Community Housing Acquisition Programme was the first of its kind in Canada. To date, we've loaned just over 21 million to non-profit organisations to acquire the kind of buildings that you're referring to in Dartmouth South. That's generated 436 new units, 141 of which are going to be deeply affordable supportive housing units. Last year, 22-23, government invested just under 20 million, 19.7 million through the Community Housing Infrastructure Repair Programme that helped repair and maintain about 450 community housing units, and hopefully will expand the life of those units going into the future.
MLA Chender.
Okay, well, we didn't hear about the private sector investment, but maybe we'll get back to that. And just one note that the Community Housing Acquisition Program, that's not new units, that's preservation of units. Quickly, is that correct?
Mr. Mason.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
MLA Chender.
Thank you. So glad to see these efforts. Still feels to me like we have the kind of freight train is going in the direction of opening up development for private sector. Again, we understand the need for supply. We are not arguing against supply. We're arguing against where the bulk of our efforts go as more and more people are sleeping in tents and there's frost on the ground. But I'll move on to asking a few questions about the task force, which I know that we were just talking about earlier. Can you tell me, or I guess I'll speak through you. Can the chair of the task force tell me how many applications for new special planning areas are currently before the task force?
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
We don't have that statistic at our fingertips. We get several inquiries, and we can get that, though.
MLA Chender.
Thank you. In the first round, my understanding is that there were 23 applications and 9 areas selected in that first batch. I know there's been one subsequently. Is there analysis or criteria that you could table that was used to select these areas, or that is used currently to select these special planning areas going forward?
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
Yes, we do have criteria. Just give me one moment. They are posted on our website, on the executive panel website. Thank you. So things that we look at are site suitability, transportation ready or funded, mix of housing types, and alignment with regional plan, community benefit, developments feasible to translate into built units, and priority alignment with provincial municipal housing priorities such as land for housing, provincial housing needs assessment, nonprofit, etc. With regard to the special planning areas that came forward, they came through, the ones that were considered in the first round through the executive panel came as a recommendation from HRM staff.
Ms. Chender.
Thank you. So I guess against that backdrop of the few criteria you read, I'm wondering in particular about Sandy Lake. So there is a push to accelerate the background studies at Sandy Lake. So my understanding was there was a year given for those background studies. Now there has been an ask that those studies be completed in 6 months. And Sandy Lake, for people who aren't familiar, is an unserviced site. It feeds out onto the Hammonds Plains Road, which has extreme traffic pressures already. It has a large degree of very sensitive environmental features, including old growth forest stands, wetlands, things of that nature. And so why would this particular development, and I'll ask about some others, I'm just curious if you can answer the question of why the need to expedite this development in particular, which, first of all, I understand that the task force, part of the role is to adapt, if needed, the possibility of community consultation. But were you to consult the community in depth, you would find a great deal of opposition to this. That doesn't in itself mean that it shouldn't go ahead, but it should cause some pause. So why this project, given that it only loosely fits into the criteria that you just presented?
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
Sure, thank you. And one of the criteria I forgot to mention, which is actually a key criteria, is potential number of units. And so Sandy Lake actually does represent thousands of potential units. It was identified as a growth node by HRM staff. It was one that they felt should move forward. It's going through all of the required environmental transportation studies, and the results of those studies will be used to determine the forward path for Sandy Lake.
Ms. Chendu.
And why is this one being expedited as opposed to other special planning areas?
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
By the very nature of naming something a special planning area, they are expedited. We have 6 with development agreements to date. Sandy Lake, with regard to the studies, because of the growth potential and the readiness to start, it was determined that those studies should go forward quickly.
MLA Chender.
Yeah, I mean, we will continue to ask questions about Sandy Lake. I would also suggest that maybe there's a desire to not let the sort of wings beneath the people opposing that project grow too large, because certainly there are a lot of people who are deeply concerned. I'd invite anyone to go through and see the stands of old growth forest there, to drive the Hammonds Plains Road at rush hour and think about whether this massive new number of units is going to be a net benefit to that community, or whether they could more properly be built elsewhere, not arguing that it does need to be built. And also that key affordability piece. Are these homes that people are actually going to be able to move in to, who are in core housing need now? I want to juxtapose that project with Dartmouth Cove. So we have a piece of land owned by the province at Dartmouth Cove. I know that it was considered originally for a special planning area. It was not determined at that time that it should be one. It's serviced. It's in downtown Dartmouth. It's on transit. It is surrounded by an area that developers are thrilled to be building in. So we have private sector development going up all around the site that the provincial government owns, and that site sits fallow, except for maybe it'll be an access point for a dump, who knows. But my understanding also is that there is actually a plan that is ready in the department for this to go ahead. This has been talked about for a decade. Can you shed any insight into why this land is not being developed? We heard from the Minister of Public Works that it's by the ocean, which
seems like a good.
Yeah, it didn't quite pass muster for me in terms of a reason, but maybe someone else can illuminate why this site's not moving ahead.
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
Thank you. And I'm trying to think back to Dartmouth Cove and why it didn't move forward. I believe that there were significant issues identified with that piece of land that needed to be remediated before it could move forward. But I can confirm I'm not aware of any plan on development that's been in the works for a decade. My apologies.
MLA Chender.
Well, if you go back and find that information, I would love if you could provide it to us. Yes, of course, there's remediation. It was a former industrial site. That remediation can be capped. The private sector development in that area, in all of the adjacent sites, are currently doing that. There are a number of developers who I believe who have expressed to me that they would work with the province to make sure that that site gets developed, because of course it's that will essentially, for those of you who haven't been in Dartmouth Cove, be a whole new residential area. And so it's in everyone's interest who has a financial interest in that all of the sites get developed, and but I think there is a huge opportunity there. But I know my time is short, and I guess I want to end this section by just asking about some of some of the issues around other sites that are not being built. So one of the things that we hear a lot about as MLAs who are predominantly in the HRM area and CBRM is the large urban housing sites not owned by the provincial government that are sitting fallow. And so St. Pat's Alexandra School comes to mind, Bloomfield, which the NDP government earmarked for affordable housing, and then the Liberal government scrapped, comes to mind. The old St. Pat's High School. I am not talking out of turn. That is what happened. And I wonder whether there is any program or policy in the works. We've suggested a vacant land tax, a permissive ability for HRM to tax developers to incentivize them to build and not land bank on these vital sites that can support a lot of housing. Is there any conversation happening from a policy perspective about how to move these kinds of vital housing developments along?
Deputy Rayfuse, you want to start?
Yeah, certainly we've heard the suggestion that there should be a vacant land tax, and I'm not sure where HRM are on our thinking. Right now, we are going to continue down our road to try to, with our current programs, to expedite processes through the panel and to incent developers through things like the HST rebate and those mechanisms. But right now,
Order.
I don't have that.
It's time for the NDP questioning. We'll move over to the PC. I recognize Mr. Taggart.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start with questions, I want to say, we're here on a investment in affordable housing, and I'm looking across the table here at senior executive director, deputy minister, executive director. We've got the government has put a tremendous amount of input and effort into in dealing with this housing crisis, and I just want to get that out there up front. So my first question is to Deputy Minister of Municipal Affairs, and that is, do you know of federal land holdings that could easily be transitioned for housing or assist with the housing crisis? And if you do, where?
Deputy Rayfuse.
I'm going to, do you know the answer? Sure. I'm going to defer that to Adrian, who has a better insight and a line of sight on that.
Yeah, Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Member. There is a federal land initiative that does make land available at either minimal or no cost, where there's a proposal to build affordable housing. We are working with them on one particular project at the moment, and looking to expand and see what other opportunities are out there. Yeah.
Thank you. MLA Taggart.
Thank you, and this one's to the Deputy of Municipal Affairs as well. The province has received a national recognition for the Community Housing Acquisition Program. Can you highlight its purpose and reasons for success? Adrian?
Deputy Rayfuse.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to defer that to Adrian, has a better insight on that.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you again for that question. At the time when the program was developed, there was a recognition of multiple renovictions, and that caused us great concern of particularly older property that was naturally affordable, tenants being evicted, repairs being made, and then the rents obviously increased significantly. And government was looking for a mechanism to help try and ensure that community housing organisations had an option to try and compete and acquire these buildings when they were put into the marketplace. So, the terms of the loan are attractive compared to what may be obtained from a bank. Most community housing organisations wouldn't be able to borrow money from a bank. So it's fairly unique in that sense. We've also been working very closely with our colleagues in Department of Community Services, because we also recognise there was an opportunity to try and create some really deeply affordable units in these older buildings. And I mentioned earlier another program, the Community Housing Infrastructure Repair Program, because one of the perhaps challenges of buying older buildings is that they do often come with sort of maintenance issues, and if we want to ensure that the lifetime of these buildings is extended, then it's important that there's going to be some repairs and maintenance, and so the Community Housing Infrastructure Repair Program has become a very significant program to help the community housing sector.
Emily Taggart.
Thank you. So this is to whoever's the proper person within the provincial housing agency. So where do you see the largest single hurdle to overcome since bringing the 5 kind of housing groups under one umbrella and consolidating that direct sort of focus?
Ms. Menchenton.
Thank you for the question. So we've become an agency, our anniversary is coming up, as a matter of fact, on December 1st. We have a year under our belts. There's a lot of things that we have overcome, and then I'm proud to say that we've been able to make a difference as far as our clients are concerned. We've reduced wait times by 10 weeks on average. Our vacancy rates are down to 2%, which is a historic low for us. And we've also increased our unit turnaround time, reduced, I should say, by 21% since the last time we spoke about it. So those things are really positive, and of course that affects people that are waiting on our wait list for homes. As far as hurdles to overcome, I think we're incrementally getting over some of those hurdles. It's a huge culture shift that has to take place when you bring together 5 separate entities under one roof, under one agency. So I would say that we continue to work on those changes. But we have a really strong, fantastic senior team who are brand new as well, and they've really been helping us a great deal to bring some of those imperatives to life within our districts. As far as our main goal for everybody is to get people off our wait list as quickly as we can into our housing.
Mr. Taggart.
That's great stuff. Sounds like you're succeeding. So how many actual units do you folks manage, including the ones that you supply for community services?
Ms. Menchenton.
So we have 11,200 units that we have under public housing management. We also, as you said, we property manage a number of DCS units, and I'm sorry, I don't have the number off the top of my head, and maybe my community services colleagues do, but that said, we do help them out as well. And we have legacy units that we also are in our portfolio. I'd say we have about 1,200 of those, and so we're looking now over the past year and also in the time to come about how we're going to morph those into our regular public housing portfolio.
Emily Taggart.
My final question is those legacy housing projects. Can you explain that to me a little bit, and what your role is there? What a legacy housing project is?
Ms. Menchenton.
Thank you. So we've inherited some of these legacy programs from the federal government. We've had some, I'll put it this way, some programs that hadn't worked out while it was with another group, like a Legion, for example, that have come over to us, and we property manage those properties. So there's a variety of ways that they've come to us. We property manage affordable housing program, which we used to be with the formerly named, I'm not sure what it was in the past, DEMA. So that's now come into our program, and we property manage those. So there's some different rent structures, and we're looking at all of that now and just trying to bring some consistency across the entire portfolio.
Emily Barkos.
Thank you very much.
Emily Barkos.
Thank you. And I'm going to direct this towards Deputy Minister Rayfuse, but Mr. Mason had brought it up a few minutes ago. The Community Housing Infrastructure and Repair Program, it has provided $20 million in investment in local communities. Can you discuss this program and its intent?
Mr. Mason.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the question. So the intent of the program is to repair existing affordable housing units that are owned by community housing organisations to maintain their lifetime and use. The program, any community housing organisation that owns housing is eligible for the program. Applications opened just recently. And it's for repairs for anything, external envelope, windows, roofs, siding, and internal repairs as well. One of the only conditions of the program is that the organization applying does need to have a financial sustainability plan. So they need to be able to demonstrate how these repairs and how this investment feeds into their wider long-term financial planning, and how they to ensure the affordability piece is the key, particularly in a high inflationary environment. So last year, the program repaired 450 units. As I say, applications have only just opened this year, so we're not quite sure what it's going to look like this fiscal, but we would anticipate it being something similar.
Emily Barkos.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, and this is for the Deputy Minister Rayfuse, are you reviewing the rent supplement program, and what have been the barriers to expanding this program, and what are the pitfalls of the program?
Deputy Rayfuse.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, over the last couple of years, there's been some changes into the rent supplement program as we gear to expand the usage of the program. One of the barriers, I would say, would be is that we have more applications than we can deal with. It just kind of caps out as a program. So we're continually looking at applications there. We did do a review this fall that would change the way in which to address seniors. It actually allowed more seniors to get more money into their pockets. So there is always going to be a program evaluation to see whether or not that program can be enhanced, or whether or not it can better serve the clients in which it's intended for.
Emily Barkos.
What are the initiatives that the department has underway to help preserve and expand affordable rental units in this province?
Deputy Rayfuse.
Affordable rent. I'm going to turn that over to Adrian, please.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you for the question. Well, there are various tools which we're currently using. So again, looking at existing programs, we launched last year the Land for Housing program, where we're making provincially owned land available to both private and community housing developers to build housing, and on the condition that some of those units remain affordable. To date, 8 projects have been approved to move forward to the next stage. Of those 8, 5 are with the community housing sector, 3 are with private developers. The Affordable Housing Development Programme provides capital contributions towards the construction of new rental housing, where on the basis, again, that some of the units are affordable, the contribution is directly towards each of those affordable units. The programme was amended last year to make it more available to the community housing sector. We reduced the equity requirements, for example, and also the capital contribution is directly commensurate with the social outcomes that are delivered, and therefore, community housing groups tend to hit higher social outcomes because they tend to offer deeper affordability in perpetuity, so they would trigger a higher capital contribution. We've mentioned a couple of the programs available already, but the Community Housing Acquisition Program to help acquire existing units, the Community Housing Infrastructure Repair Program, which we just mentioned. We have the Community Housing Growth Fund. One of the challenges we have in Nova Scotia is that we don't naturally have a very strong or deep community housing sector. So in the background, the important thing that we need to ensure we're doing is building capacity within that sector. So the Growth Fund is intended to do that. There's funding available for capacity building, for innovation research, for planning and pre-development, for just helping to both establish new organizations, to help existing organizations improve their capacity and their financial planning, and then also help to sow the seeds for growth going into the future.
Ms. Barkos.
Okay, so I'd like to ask, what are the key initiatives and the associated investments to increase supply in the next 5-year plan of housing? And that could be to Deputy Minister Rayfuse, or I think everybody needs an Adrian, maybe Adrian, or whomever can answer that, actually.
Yeah, Deputy Rayfuse.
Certainly, I will start, and then we'll see if others can add it in. But in the 5-year, the housing plan, if you recall, it had 3 themes involved and a number of initiatives attached to each one of those things. The first one was around increasing supply. So if we look around what we've done or what we're planning to do to help increase supply, I would be remiss if I didn't repeat the announcement of new public housing units that will be built over the next couple of years, where we're going to build 220 new public housing units across and 4 communities across the province. We have participated in a pilot to build 52 tiny homes, tiny home community. We have announced the backyard and secondary suite program that helps increase supply on an affordable basis within existing houses. One of the things that we have done is that we did match with the federal government on the relief of the tax for multi-use or multi-unit apartment buildings, which we're hoping that will move planned developments from that wait aspect to move them along and so they start putting shovels in the ground. As I think we've indicated earlier, a number of developers have indicated that has moved the needle for them, so they will move on things that have already been planned. We have and supported 38 new units for vulnerable populations on the rapid housing initiatives. We've made legislative changes to help expedite the development process with the HRM. We have made changes to the short-term rental market so that we can encourage those, some individuals to put those units back onto the housing market for longer terms as to incentivize that area of the market. We have, as a government, we've also accelerated the investment in skills trades because one of the issues that many of our developers are facing is a lack of skilled trades. So we are working with our partners at Advanced Education and Skills and Training to get more skilled labor into the province or expedite the apprenticeship program through changes to the apprenticeship program or to encourage more people to enter into the trades because there is a shortage that has been identified and I would say that's across the spectrum from carpenters to building inspectors, and we're trying to intervene everywhere as we can. I could go on. We've announced more long-term care beds for seniors, and sometimes people don't realize that that actually helps the housing supply issue across the board. As we make more room for seniors in long-term care facilities, that frees up housing in communities. Many times, a senior would be in an overhoused situation, waiting for placement, and that allows an opportunity for a family to move into those units. I could go on, but if you so that gives you an idea of things where we've attempted to increase supply.
MLA Barkhouse.
Well, thank you, because it is a puzzle. I mean, you add on the 620 affordable, or the student residents over the last, it all helps. But it leads me to ask the question, immigration and population increase are crucial to our province's growth and prosperity. But there is no question that having more people significantly impacts the rental markets. What are we doing to protect Nova Scotians from rising rental costs?
Deputy Rayfuse.
Certainly, as I stated earlier, we do look at the supply as one of the ways in which we can protect Nova Scotians. Additionally, we've worked with our partners in those key sectors where immigration is a necessity for their workers, predominantly in the healthcare sector, where we've participated in the housing for healthcare workers so that they obviously can have a place to live, but don't put an extra strain on the communities in which they're moving to. we continue to work with across the province to help individuals through our rent supplement program, which helps individuals all across the province. They have to be residents of Nova Scotia to participate in that. So that helps them on that aspect. And again, we believe that if we provide the tools to incent and supply, it will not only address the needs of growing population and immigration, but the needs of the current population.
MLA Barkos.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll pass it on to MLA Sheehy Richard.
Ms. Sheehy Richard.
I think I only have a couple seconds. I'm just going to ask a minute and a half. Okay, I'm just going to ask Ms. Elliott Lopez just a question. Being the new chair of the task force, can you please provide us with some insight as to why it was deemed necessary to create the task force in the first place and to create this new panel?
Ms. Elliott Lopez with 50 seconds.
Okay. The executive panel, as you know, was created as a temporary mechanism. It has a sunset clause of next fall in 2024. The gap in housing within HRM when the panel was created was estimated to be about 17,000. And according to the recent needs assessment, had risen to 17.5 as of December 2022, and it's expected to grow to 31,000 by 27-28 without intervention. So that equates to about 6,000 over status quo to meet projected demand and address the gap. We know that with the gap in housing, everybody here has agreed today that housing prices and rents have increased exponentially. And again, we go back to...
Order.
Sorry.
We'll move into our second round of questioning where each party will have approximately 10 minutes. I recognize Emily Churchill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, the link to long-term care facilities and housing I don't think is accurate. That's not going to take pressure off the housing market. That's going to take pressure out of our hospitals. There's big wait time with seniors in hospitals waiting for those beds. That's who's going to take up those spaces. It's not going to be seniors leaving their home. It's going to be seniors in hospital who need care. I have some questions for Deputy McKinnon on the homelessness situation. According to Affordable Housing Nova Scotia, we've got well over 1,000 people in Halifax that are homeless right now. We know that the tents they've received are also summer. They're not all season tents. So we're really concerned about people freezing and potentially perishing this winter. Has the department looked at available community halls, church halls that might be made available to provide emergency shelter to these folks that are experiencing homelessness as we enter into cold season?
Deputy McKinnon.
Thanks for the question. Yes, what I'm finding in this new role is that there are a lot of people and organizations out there who want to step into this to help come up with solutions. We've made significant investments in obviously what's important with each arrangement that we set up, whether it's a shelter, whether it's supportive housing, that the supports are there. So I have had initial discussions with colleagues at Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage who also fund some of these community organizations and spaces and that infrastructure. I've had those conversations with Deputy Rayfuse as well on what is the art of the possible there. There are organizations, met with one just a couple weeks back, the Evangeline Club in Kings County, who's doing that kind of work. The key for us, I think, is to ensure that whatever organization or facility we work with is connected to a service provider. It's very complex work. There are folks who may be suffering, by no fault of their own, with mental health addictions issues, and so we need to make sure that those supports are available, whatever spaces we use. But we will have a conversation with anyone at this point who has space available.
MLA Churchill.
And we know those services aren't available in tents right now. The 200 pallet shelters that were announced in October. The CEO of that organization isn't answering media calls. We don't know what the timeline is to get those in place or where they're going to be. Are there delays in getting those 200 pallet shelters made available as quickly as possible.
Deputy McKinnon.
Yeah, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to talk about pallets a little bit, and I might ask Ms. Knight to chime in here. We're aiming to have those up and ready this winter, as the minister has said. It is a pilot. No province has, none of our colleagues have done this before, so we're working through some really important issues, because these are not just, they're not just, I think people think of wooden pallets. They are very much not that. They are communities that we want people to live in and to be well supported. And we want the communities that, where they end up, the surrounding communities to support them. We know what the outcomes can be when those supports aren't there. So, things like their fencing pieces. We're working with Public Works to identify all of that, all of those pieces of land, and they need to be serviceable. So water, for example, running washrooms, food services, and they also need to be attached to a service provider. So Pallet, the company, has its own dignity standards that we need to meet, and we're taking those very seriously as we roll these out.
Mr. Churchill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We're in winter now. We've got below freezing temperatures that we're experiencing. We still don't have a timeline on when these shelters are going to be in place. And I'm concerned we may lose people, or people are going to get desperate and take desperate action, which is a growing concern, I know, for local businesses and homeowners and community members as well. If the deputy could provide a timeline on when those pallets are going to be in place, I'd appreciate it. And also, we have not heard where the 100 pallet shelters outside of HRM are going to be located. Could the deputy please provide this committee with an update on where those shelters are going to be located?
Deputy Minister McKinnon.
I want to have the information from Public Works before we commit to a precise timeline, which we'll have probably over the next couple of weeks. We have the HRM sites, which we've identified a number of them for possibility, are undergoing that kind of analysis with Public Works and Nova Scotia Power to make sure that they're appropriate. We've had initial conversations with in Cape Breton as well, as there's a growing need there, and we're still doing that outreach with those interested municipalities. I think it's important to note that the communities where the pallets end up need to be supported and endorsed by councils and communities, so that supports are there for these folks, and that the surrounding community knows what these can look like. And I think that there's some communication to be done in that area that we're rolling out with municipalities and MLAs.
Mr. Churchill.
Mr. Chair, I'm worried about the delays in these pallet shelters. Not only is there not enough of them to deal with the amount of homelessness that we know exists here in Halifax and other parts of the province, we are now having this delayed more deeply into the winter months. Winter is here. This issue was flagged in the summer that homelessness had doubled. And the minister at the time compared it to summer camping. And so this was a natural evolution and didn't raise any red flags about the fact that homelessness had increased. And I want to know, does the deputy think that had we taken action in the summer when the red flags were going up with increased amounts of tents and people living in them, if we could have gotten these shelters in place before winter hit?
Deputy Minister McKinnon.
I just want to assure the members that that work was underway in the summer. I think the issues are, and I'm a couple of months into this, so I'm catching up on the work that has been done. But work to identify a winter shelter, for example, began in the spring, summer last year, where we've got staff who are quite literally knocking on doors to try to find space for shelters. So it has been ongoing. The pallet opportunity became available, and I know folks jumped on it as soon as they could. The reality is we need more housing to move on some of these pieces. I do just want to mention that we continue to build capacity at at the winter shelter on Windmill Road. And if you would allow Ms. Knight to give an update on that work, I would appreciate it.
Ms. Knight? And Ms. Churchill.
Thank you so much. More market housing is not going to deal with the emergency homelessness situation. We need emergency housing now, and I'm very concerned about the delayed timelines and getting people into shelters. I really do fear that we're going to see people perish this winter as a result of cold temperature or lack of support and lack of shelter. The deputy did mention the shelter beds in Dartmouth, but we also know that other shelter beds have been closed due to lack of funding this year. So with Ms. Knight's update, and I'd ask for it to be brief because I only have a few moments, can she please tell us what the net gain of beds have been when you take into consideration the new 50 that have been brought online, but also we've heard there was up to 30 that were closed. Could the deputy or Ms. Knight provide us with an analysis of the net gain of shelter beds?
Ms. Knight.
Thank you. I'm not familiar with the closure of shelter beds. We have 431 beds in the system if we include the capacity 100 at the new Dartmouth shelter, which is almost ready to take 100. There is capacity there, and we have outreach teams working actively in encampment sites to help people relocate. It may be that there's concern. Last winter, the winter shelter closed and is reopened with 70 extra beds this year.
Emily Churchill.
The timeline for the tiny homes in Sackville, when will those be in place?
Ms. Knight.
We're working towards a late spring, early summer opening.
Ms. Churchill.
We've got some mixed messages on the housing strategy. We were told that it was ready for last spring. The Premier said he wasn't going to release it.
Time has elapsed with the party. I recognize Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump all over the place, sort of wrap some things up from what I've been hearing. But the first thing I just want to do is say that this, I'm glad my colleagues began with the story that she did about knocking on doors on Gaston Road, because the thing is that all of us on these sides of the tables represent people who are actually having these struggles. And we are all sitting here in a very comfortable, warm room talking about how we can do it. But the fact is that meanwhile, while we're sitting around here talking about this stuff and policy and what's the best way to do things, and yes, we've done this, and yes, we haven't, or no, we haven't done this, there are people actively right now either outside in a tent or freaking out because they don't know how they're going to pay this month's rent, and that they're facing homelessness if not this month, then the next time they have a rent increase or the power goes up or whatever. So I just want to center that and ask my first question about people in that category in my own community at Ocean Breeze. So Ocean Breeze is also known as Wallace Heights, down by the new bridge in Dartmouth North. We know, I'm sure you all know the story, but there's 1,000 people living there in about 400 units right now. Pretty affordable, under market, not on purpose, just, the market, because of the rent cap, those rents have not gone up significantly. But it is literally what people can afford, and sometimes too much. And so it's being redeveloped. There's a plan to relocate people. They will never get homes that are as affordable as they are now, and many of them will never get homes with like a little backyard patch and, able to have a dog. And this is like a family community down there. So we know, I have brought this up to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. He has said in the House that he has not heard from the owners of Ocean Breeze about special planning areas or how to keep some of those units affordable when they develop. And yet we have a FOIPOP that suggests that they have reached out several times to the department. So I want to know what is happening with Ocean Breeze from the department's point of view. Will the province do something to make sure there are affordable houses? And we can be proactive about this, right? We don't have to wait, even though they have reached out. Will there be a proactive connection with the developers at Ocean Breeze to make sure that there are actually deeply affordable houses there? Is the department working with the developer on a plan to make sure that tenants are not displaced? And how come it has not been designated a special planning area?
Deputy Rayfuse?
Let me start, and on the planning area question, I will defer. And certainly, the minister does not meet with the developers. That's an activity that the staff takes on behalf of the department. So he would not have met with them. We have met with Ocean Breeze developers and to talk about the programs that we have available if they wish to pursue to make some of the redevelopment units and into the affordability spectrum. We've also talked to them about their plans as they develop as how they're going to handle displaced individuals, and they wanted to assure us that they had a plan in place that was fully explained in several community meetings to the residents of the area, and the options made available to them as they move forward. Whether or not the residents take advantage of that, that's the individual choices on their perspective. Again, we've met them to talk about the affordable development program and what aspects we could participate in. And that's really for them to choose. About special planning areas, I'm not aware of that, and perhaps maybe Vicky could answer that.
Ms. Elliott Lopez.
Thank you for the question. So, to my knowledge, they haven't made a formal application to become a special planning area. There have been conversations about it. Again, they already have as-of-right development, and if they want to add density over and above that as-of-right development, we would always send them back to HRM Planning to start that discussion before the executive panel were to step in.
Emily LeBlanc.
Okay, thank you very much. I also just want to say, because we've been talking about, what is affordable, what's the definition of affordable, that I would like to ask the Deputy Minister to table the analysis that you referenced earlier, which is the analysis that more supply will result in lower rents. I would love to. Geez, Louise, what is happening? I would love to see that, please, if you could forward that to the Public Accounts Committee. The fact is, my colleague brought it up a few minutes ago, and I hate to agree with him, but as we build our population, which is one of our goals in this province, the fact is that if we build supply and we build population, there's not going to be a trickle down, because there's going to be people going into those units at those market prices. And so I'd love to see, I would love to believe that there would be a trickle down effect on and downward pressure on the rents, but I'd love to see the analysis. So I also wanted to ask Mr. Mason, you talked about some of the developments that the province has funded, and again, you said on the condition that some units are affordable. So the government is giving money to developers, and on the condition that some of the units are affordable. What we still are not clear on is how affordable are they. So is that condition 80%? Is it 60%? Is it rent geared to income? What is it? We are the Public Accounts Committee. We need to know if we're getting good value for the investments of public money. And so could you provide our committee with a detailed analysis of the value for money that Nova Scotia is getting on those affordable housing investments?
Mr. Deputy Rayfuse.
Before Adrian answers that question, I want to get back to your first questions about the analysis that shows that supply does. Not only will I provide that to you, we have already provided that to this committee. It has publicly been released. It's in the housing needs assessment, where the analysis show the supply does have an impact, a positive impact on pricing.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you. Last year, 22-23, we provided capital contributions. So just to be clear on the programme, we only provide capital contributions towards the affordable units. We do not subsidise market units. So it's only the affordable units. Last year, the programme delivered about 308 new units. Of the 308, 225 were affordable. So there was capital contributions towards each of those 225 affordable units. In terms of how affordable, the minimum eligibility eligibility is 80% of the average market rent. So we establish the average market rent, not the maximum market rent, the average market rent, and the minimum eligibility would be 80% of that. In many cases, the affordability being offered is much deeper than that. It could go down to 60%. We incentivize deeper affordability by offering a greater capital contribution, because obviously there is a cost to delivering that affordability. So we apply a deeper subsidy for deeper affordability.
Emily LeBlanc.
Thank you. That's helpful, but I would love to see it all in writing and presented to the committee following this meeting, if possible, like a breakdown. It would be helpful. And also, I will say that's great. 285 units, I believe you said, 25 units. Again, let us not forget that we have many more people waiting for public housing or waiting for, subsidized housing. We have a wait list of 5,000 people in Nova Scotia, and we need more than 225. So what is the plan to get us all of those 5,000, for instance, off the public housing wait list through different community, community-led, community housing, supported housing, all of the different things. I'm just going to leave it with that one. I'm not going to ask you actually to answer it. I'm worried about time. How much time do I have?
You have 40 seconds.
Seriously?
Yep.
All right, you might as well try to answer it in 40 seconds.
Mr. Mason?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, I'd just be repeating what Deputy Minister Rayfuse said earlier. There's a number. It's just one tool of many, and we know that we need more. That's why, again, it's one of the core pillars of the Housing Action Plan to build more affordable housing. I do want to just say as well, when we reduce the rents, we also need to make sure that the units go to people who need them. So we do income tests to make sure that they are going to people who earn.
Order. That concludes time for the NDP. I recognize Emily Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Minister McKinnon, in your opening remarks, you mentioned about the housing continuum. And recognition of this continuum is so critical because the knowledge and the tailored supports that it could provide people as they move forward. I guess what I'm wondering is if you could tell me a little bit more about the housing continuum and in particular how it is impacting and how Nova Scotia is positioned within that.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Minister McKinnon.
Yes, thank you. I'd say when we talk about a housing continuum, it's, the main thing is to try to meet people where they are. So at one end, I think we were actually, the table is kind of representative of it. At one end, our department provides supports like diversion supports, so to service provider organizations across the province to try to prevent people from being homeless, and so that's funding to pay a bill, to help with rent, those kinds of things, and then there are those experiencing homelessness who we work to support through our partnerships with groups like the Hub. We talked about tents earlier. We were working with them to provide some winter tents to folks. We get into then shelters and more supportive housing, and I do want to just clarify my remarks earlier when I said we need more housing. I didn't mean just market housing. I mean more supportive shelter beds and supportive housing, which we are working towards. Then you get into some of the work of our colleagues here in terms of public housing, the affordable housing we've been discussing so much today, and then more permanent housing. And, for some, permanent housing may never be either, a goal or an outcome. So we need to meet those people where they are and provide and wrap the supports around them. And that doesn't mean just the work that DCS does. That means working with our partners in health, mental health and addictions, and a number of different departments on actions to address poverty.
Emily Richard.
Thank you. I have community organizations that are looking at some transitional housing and shelter beds as well. And one of the programs that they questioned me about, and I kind of guided them your guys' way, was the CHAP, the Community Housing Assistance Program. And I just wondered if you could go into a little bit more detail of how that program works and the partnerships that are created within community.
Deputy Minister McKinnon.
I know we've heard from my colleague Adrian a lot today, so I'm actually going to ask Ms. Knight to just give a few examples, I think, of some of the partnerships that we've developed to help nonprofits build and build more housing.
Sure. Ms. Knight.
Thank you. As Mr. Mason mentioned earlier, the Community Housing Acquisition Program is actually a game changer for Nova Scotia. I was recently at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Conference. It was hosted here in Halifax, and it was noted by every jurisdiction we spoke with that it was how envious they were that we had access to this type of a program, and it's really made a huge difference in our ability to buy buildings and create new supportive housing units really quickly in a time where new buildings take time to get into place. And so it's allowed for us to actually put in place 449, it's a large portion of the 449 units that we've been able to put in place over the last 2 years, which, as the deputy has mentioned, is 73% of all supportive housing units in the province, just created in the last 2 years. So these new programs and new levers are allowing us to take fast action. A couple key partnerships that are worth mentioning. We're really working in the space to understand most vulnerable populations. So we have youth-specific supportive housing, housing specific to the 2S LGBTQIA population, as well as those exiting corrections, 147 new units just for individuals who are exiting corrections. Women, families with children. Great announcement recently with Akuma, with the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, the Nova Scotia Cooperative Council, all around creating supportive housing units that are deeply affordable to support our lowest income, most vulnerable Nova Scotians.
Ms. Sheehy-Richard.
Thank you for that. So in particular, those would be an example of one of those partnerships could be, vacant homes or older homes. So would it assist, because some of the nonprofits that are looking at doing some things in my community, they hit barriers with funding support. So I guess, is that part of the CHAP program as well, or would that be another tool in Mr. Mason's department that would help assist those two programs?
Ms. Knight.
Thank you for that question. It's an important point. Actually, we work in partnership. So Municipal Affairs and Housing is able to do the programming that allows for the purchase of the building. The loan program, we bring the operational support. So we make sure the building is sustainable, that the service providers have the staffing and the programming funding that they need to provide the best supports to the residents.
MLA Sheehy-Richard.
Thank you. Since I rushed Ms. Lopez through her explanation of the new panel, I just want to go back a little bit about it and I guess maybe finish up, but then pivot towards what the single largest issue facing development moving faster in HRM, because you mentioned quite a few times just about different areas of where they're at, but is there a single largest issue, for example, that is the common denominator?
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
Thank you for the question. So that's a tough one. If you were to ask 5 different people what the single largest issue is, you would likely get 5 different answers to that question. I would say that there are a number of issues facing quick development in HRM. One is good land. We know that land needs to be serviceable. It needs to be accessible. Infrastructure needs to be there. Transit corridors. We look at all of those pieces, and that's a struggle these days. Approval processes, labor shortages, rising costs, and it is really difficult when people don't want density in their backyards to work through that. So those are some of the key challenges that we're faced with as an executive panel and as a department that we're trying to work through right now. We liaise with developers daily. We talk to them, we listen to them to, again, hear about those barriers. We work with our colleagues at HRM and with the community community housing sector. And again, our job is to try and create better conditions through policy levers, through funding opportunities and programs, and we need to work together to address those challenges that I've named.
MLA Sheehy-Richard.
And I guess I'm going to ask the heated question, but can you describe how Bill 329 will assist the work of the task force that you're doing?
Ms. Elliott-Lopez.
Thank you. I am going to ask my colleague Jared, who's been sitting just waiting for a question.
Mr. Babushkin.
Thank you for the question. It's my first in public accounts, too, I'll note. So Bill 329 will continue to build on some of the work that has happened in the past. I think this is the wrong sheet. So it will provide additional work on helping to lean out the development process and make it a little bit more efficient through providing HRM with a number of authorities, including discharging development agreements that are more restrictive than current zoning and private covenants the same. It provides clarity around the role of council and staff insofar as it will allow council to approve development agreements in principle and let staff work on the nitty-gritty details, technical experts. It provides stability for the development community in terms of having development fees and permit fees frozen for a period of time to allow developers to plan and move forward in an otherwise unstable and volatile times. I guess we've heard today on a number of fronts that rising costs and unpredictability of labor supply are key contributors to whether or not a development will move forward, and we believe that the changes presented in Bill 329 will help sort of calm the waters, lean out the process, and allow folks to operate in a little bit more of a stable environment.
MLA Sheehy-Richard.
15 seconds. I guess a comment would be, so for example, like a subdivision that would have a big restrictive covenant, and as they want to expand that community, they might look at dismissing that development agreement and implementing a new one.
Order. That concludes questioning today. I'd like to thank all those who participated. I would open up for closing remarks if we have any. No. Seeing none? Oh, you? Okay, Deputy McKinnon.
I'd just like to say it was my first time here. I'm sure the first of many to come. But to MLA Chender's first kind of opening statement about hearing from families and constituents, I'm very conscious that you are. I know it's a priority of Minister Boudreau's and I as new to the portfolio to hear those and really understand those cases. So I appreciate hearing that today. Thank you.
Thank you. You're free to leave. Just with the amount of people here, maybe let's take a quick, and I'm going to hold it to a quick 3-minute recess. We're now in recess. Order. Okay, I'm going to call this committee meeting back to order. We had a motion on the floor from the end, MLA LeBlanc. It's been there the past couple of weeks. I think everyone should have a copy of it. Is there further discussion on this motion? MLA McGuire.
So last week I did put forward a amendment to the motion. I would like to put forward another amendment. Since last week, since we've had this discussion around this motion, I have spoken to different people within government and different people within association, or sorry, in the public that deal with these type of issues and other issues, especially around affordability. And one of the things that was said last week was, the member who had put it forward, one of the things she had said respectfully was that these things are targeted. These type of targeted resources and programs that I was asking for are very difficult and sometimes impossible to do it. I'm just paraphrasing, so I apologize. But I mean, that's simply not true. Like, income assistance is targeted, the child tax credit is targeted, the heat pump program is targeted. And again, I go back to like having and giving this program to everybody, especially the people that do not need it, does not make sense to me. Because that money that we are giving to the 1% and the wealthiest for these type of programs could be going to more targeted resources for people that need it the most. So I do agree with this motion. I just think that just throwing it out there without any real thought to how it impacts everybody isn't the right way to go about. So my motion would be for the committee to my amendment to this would be to, as part of this, would be for the committee to send a letter to the proper department to see if this could be targeted before we vote on this as a motion. Because again, I just fundamentally have a problem with giving people money that don't need it. So my amendment would be to, along with this motion, is to get some information before we move forward on whether this can be targeted or not.
Can you my apologies, Emily McGuire, can you make your motion again? It's amendment again. The way that I'm seeing this is that you're almost moving to defer the original motion to find back, and that wouldn't be debatable. Just
So can I ask the
MLA McGuire, please.
Sorry, can I ask council a question? Would this, so Mr. Head, would this be better done as a separate motion, or would this be better done as defer, or would this be better done as an amendment? So what I'm trying to get at here is that what was said last week when it was voted down was that these this cannot be targeted. We know that it can be targeted. We know that government does target programs all the time and funding all the time, whether it's solar, whether it's income assistance, whether it's child tax credit, whether it's heat pumps. There's all kinds of different programs that are targeted to the people that need it the most. So what I want to get is the information to show that, yes, indeed, that this can be a targeted program and it can be rolled out as quickly and more effectively. So how would council recommend that or what does council recommend I do with that?
Mr. Head.
Well, I think it depends, as a separate motion, it depends upon what the result on the main motion. If the main motion is defeated, you're quite open as to what you move. If the motion passes, you would be somewhat restricted in not being able to make a motion that was counter to the motion that was just passed. So,
MLA McGuire.
So what I apologize. I'm not trying to monopolize the time here. What I'm trying to do is have this information put forward so that we can make a well-informed vote on this. And I'm trying to get that information before we actually vote on that motion. because this information directly impacts how people should or shouldn't vote on this motion.
Just before I recognize MLA Chender, maybe consideration of a separate motion, just something to think about while MLA Chender's. I recognize MLA Chender.
Well, just quickly, two things. I want to say that that doesn't feel like an amendment. It feels like a separate ask. And in this motion, the home retrofit programs, particularly the Canada Greener Homes, those are not income-tested programs. Anyone has access. We are asking the province to step up and you know, everybody needs access to that. I know that there are MLAs who have accessed those programs with our salaries. I think if you were to look, you would find there are many MLAs who have taken advantage of that. Everyone needs to do their part, and that's what this motion recognizes, both to be addressing the demand side issues and the supply side issues. So the simplest and most affordable way that we can reduce our reliance on carbon is to both decarbonize our energy supply, but also to ensure that we're using less of it. And this is one way that we can do that. So, I mean, with respect, I would say if the stance of the member is that they don't support that, then vote against the motion. If they do support that idea, then vote for the motion. But this doesn't feel like an amendment.
Thank you. To me, it's almost two separate things. So what I would ask is if we could deal with the original motion and then MLA McGuire.
So respectfully, that's not what I said. I didn't say I did or did not support the motion. What I said is I would like some information to make a well-informed decision. So for the member to sit here and say that, you know, if you don't, this is about whether you do or do not, is simply not true. What I said was we need to make a well-informed decision. And with respect to like most affordable way and the simplest ways, what I would say in a time of high inflation, in a time when everything's getting more and more expensive, people that can afford it, the 1%, that money that we would be giving them is better served in topping up Solar City and other programs where people can actually afford to decarbonize their homes. Right now, when we look at Solar City, or sorry, the solar program, the residential solar program, that went from 50%, I think, down to about $5,000 on solar panels. So that money that we were taking that could be better served, used in different places to help people that don't have the means and don't have the resources to decarbonize, that could help them with energy poverty, that could help them with inflation, that could help them with high taxes. We now have a city council that's debating in HRM on raising property taxes 10%. More money coming out of people's pocket that simply cannot afford it. So instead of saying, like, let's go with the simplest way, what I'm saying is, let's go with the best way that has the most impactful, that impacts people's lives the best. And one of those ways is giving people that don't have the means to get off carbon a way to do it. If you speak to people in HRM, if you speak to people across Nova Scotia, I would guess the vast majority of them would love to have solar panels, would love to have their homes retrofitted, but they simply cannot afford it. And I would be willing, as she did mention the salaries of MLAs, I'd be willing to not use those programs if that meant that people that couldn't afford those programs would get access to it, and they would get access to it in a more equitable way, and that means more money for them and less money for people that can afford it, right? So it's not about whether I support this or not. What it is about is, instead of us as a committee just throwing policy out there, and that is not, you know, I've been chastised over and over and over and over in this committee for doing exactly what's happening here today. And so instead of throwing policy out there, what I would love to see is all of us working together to create good policy that, especially on this side of the House, that puts pressure on government to actually pass this kind of stuff.
MLA McDonald, on a point of order.
Mr. Chair, I'd like you to vote on whether this is in order, because this amendment, as even my colleague across said, this is not an amendment, it's a new motion. We're now debating something that technically, in my view, is out of order, and I'd like you to rule on whether it's in order or not. Actually, first, then you're right.
Sorry, so yes, no, that is two separate motions, and I'd remind the honourable member to speak about the NDP motion if he has anything further to say in our short time.
Yeah,
MLA Maguire.
I'm going to get to a vote, but what I will say is I was actually speaking on the original motion. And with that, I will call the question on the NDP's motion with a recorded vote.
Any further discussion on this motion? Question has been called. All those in favour? Recorded vote has been called. I'll ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
MLA Barcos?
What?
This is on the original motion.
This is on the NDP motion, correct?
The original motion.
The original motion.
Original motion.
No.
MLA Taggart.
Taggart.
Sorry. Taggart.
No.
No.
MLA McDonald.
No.
MLA Sheehy Richard.
No.
MLA Maguire.
Yes.
MLA LeBlanc.
Yes.
MLA Chender.
Yes.
MLA Young.
No.
5 noes and 3 yeses.
The motion is defeated. I recognize the honourable member for Hants East.
Was sent to the clerk, and the clerk has sent it out to everybody, and I believe she noted that I was making a change to it. So it should be, and this is regarding subcommittee. I move that the subcommittee of public accounts shall meet following the regular scheduled meetings.
Motion on the floor following public account. So it would be after our public account, the subcommittee. But just for, in general, yeah. Is there further discussion on this motion? MLA Maguire.
Yeah, again, what is old is new, and what is new is old. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, it used to be after, now it's back to new, and then it's back to here, then it's back to here. So here we are again, debating something about, several times, I'm the longest sitting member on this committee. Several times we have said, let's have subcommittee after committee. And the governing side has said, no, we have things to do. We have to get out of here. Well, let's extend it to do this. No, we can't. We have to extend. So again, this goes back, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, this goes back to, we have a path forward, and this is where I'm not trying to speak for Ms. LeBlanc, but Ms. LeBlanc has been a big proponent on the path forward and getting it done, and sometimes I've been a stick in the wheel or whatever and all that stuff, but this again goes back to, like, we have plans, we have a path forward, and here we are again, changing things up depending on what side wants what. So I do think that I don't agree with doing this piecemeal. And this is what, I don't agree with doing this piecemeal. We had a discussion in the path forward about when and where we should have, just wait.
I recognize...
No, I have the floor.
Is it a point of order?
Is it a point of order? No.
I recognize Emily Barkis on a point of order.
Well, I feel that we're... I feel like I could say anything because they're not listening, but...
That's not a point of order.
Sorry, that was a point of order on myself.
I recognize Emily Maguire.
I will respectfully say that I may not always look like I'm listening, but I'm always listening. I have the ability to listen and speak at the same time. What I will say is that I do think that before we vote on this stuff, we need to have a conversation about the path forward. And these things were addressed in the path forward, and yet here we are again, pulling bits and pieces out of the entire plan, right? When in fact, what we should be doing is taking a solid meeting, having a discussion on the path forward, and having the committee place the path forward on the floor for a vote. We can't continue to just piecemeal this thing and say, well, today we're going to put this through because it's advantageous. Today we're going to put that through because it's advantageous. What we need to be doing, there's a lot of work that was done. We need to put that on the floor, and what I would say is I would be very supportive of anyone in this committee that would put it on the floor as a...
Order. Thank you, Emma McGuire, for those important remarks. Our time has elapsed. Our next meeting will be December 6, 2023, in Camera Office of the Auditor General, 2023 Financial Report. Meeting is adjourned.